In my parents' house, love was a matter of logistics. It was about providing the best education, the most stable home, and the most secure future. It was a well-managed portfolio, a strategic investment in their only daughter. What it was not, what it had never been, was a matter of the heart. Have you ever felt like a beautiful, well-cared-for piece of furniture in your own life, polished and presented, but never actually asked what you want? If you've ever felt trapped by the gilded cage of your family's expectations, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You and I have a lot in common. My name is Lila, and for 22 years, I had been the perfect, dutiful daughter. I got straight A's. I played the piano beautifully. I never caused trouble. I understood that my life was not entirely my own. It was a reflection on my family, the prominent and respected Chen family. My parents had sacrificed a lot when they immigrated to America, and they had built an empire from scratch. My duty was to honor that sacrifice by being a perfect, blemish-free continuation of their legacy. I had tried my best to be exactly that, but my heart was a traitor. It was filled with dog-eared copies of Jane Austen novels and a secret, hopeless belief in a love that was grand and passionate and chosen, a love that had absolutely no place in my parents' carefully constructed 5-year plan for my life. The plan began in earnest on a Tuesday night. "The Wang family is coming for dinner tonight," my mother announced that morning, her voice filled with a significant, nervous energy. "Wear the blue silk dress, and please, Leela, try to be charming." The Wang family. That meant David Wang. David was the son of my father's oldest friend and business associate. He was, on paper, the most eligible bachelor in our entire community. He was 28, handsome in a clean-cut, corporate way, with an MBA from Wharton and a burgeoning career in private equity. He was the human equivalent of a blue-chip stock stable, reliable, and guaranteed to yield impressive returns. He was my parents' dream. That evening, I sat at our long, formal dining table, the blue silk dress feeling like a costume. The table was set with our best china, the kind we only use for the most important occasions. This, I was beginning to realize, was one of them. David and his parents were polite, polished, and exuded the same quiet, immense wealth that my family did. David was perfectly pleasant. He asked about my final year at university, where I was studying art history, a major my parents had deemed a suitable, if useless, hobby for a young woman of my station. He had a nice smile. He complimented my mother's cooking. He was, in a word, perfect, and I felt absolutely nothing. Our conversation was stilted, formal, like a job interview for a position I had never applied for. The real conversation, I soon realized, was happening between our parents. They weren't talking to us. They were talking about us, as if we were two prize racehorses being inspected before a sale. "David just closed a major deal last month," Mr. Wang said, beaming at his son. "Bought out a mid-sized tech firm. The boy has a good eye for acquisitions." "And Lila," my mother chimed in, giving me a pointed, proud smile. "She is so talented, a wonderful pianist, and she has always been such a good, obedient girl." I felt my cheeks flush. She was listing my attributes like features on a car. Good mileage, low maintenance, comes in a nice color. The main course arrived, a beautiful steamed sea bus. As my father served the guests, he looked at Mr. Wang, his expression one of deep satisfaction. "You know, Samuel," my father said, "our families have been allies for 20 years. Our businesses have grown alongside each other. It seems only natural to solidify that alliance for the next generation." Alliance. The word hung in the air, cold and sharp. It was a word used for nations and corporations, not for two people who were supposed to fall in love. And in that moment, the entire evening snapped into terrifying focus. This wasn't a dinner, it was a negotiation, a merger. And I was the primary asset being traded. I looked at David. He was just calmly eating his fish, seemingly unbothered by my father's statement. He looked up, caught my eye, and gave me another one of his pleasant, empty smiles. He was a part of this. He knew the terms of the deal. A wave of panic washed over me. I had to say something. I had to stop this train before it left the station. "The fish is wonderful, Mrs. Chen," David said to my mother. "I was just thinking, I jumped in, my voice a little too loud. That it's funny how we plan our lives. But you can never really plan who you fall in love with. The heart is so unpredictable, isn't it? 4 pairs of parental eyes turned to me. The friendly chatter stopped. My mother gave me a look that was both a plea and a command. Not now. Leela, do not ruin this. That is a very romantic notion, my dear, Mrs. Wang said. Her smile thin and brittle. But a stable life, a good partnership. That is not built on something as fickle as romance. It is built on shared values, a good foundation, and mutual respect. Love is something that grows from a sensible choice. My father nodded in vigorous agreement. Exactly. Passion is for novels, security is for life. They were talking about my future, and they had just informed me that the one thing I secretly valued most, love, was not even a consideration. I was to be part of a sensible choice, an alliance, a merger. I looked at my hands, clenched in my lap under the heavy linen napkin. I felt like a bird in a beautiful, gilded cage, and the door was slowly being locked. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I retreated into myself, giving quiet, polite answers when spoken to. My smile feeling like a painful mask stretched across my face. When the Wang family finally left, my parents were beaming. Well, my mother said, her face alight with triumph, that could not have gone better. They adore you, Lila. And David is such a fine young man, so successful, so respectful. A perfect match, my father agreed, putting an arm around my mother. This union will be the crowning achievement of our lives. We have secured your future, my daughter. You will have a life of comfort, and status, and security. You will want for nothing. Nothing except the one thing I actually want, I thought. A silent scream building in my chest. They were so happy, so proud of the beautiful, secure prison they had just built for me. And they honestly, truly, believed it was a gift. That night, I went up to my pristine, beautiful bedroom. I stood at the window and looked out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the high brick wall that surrounded our property. It had always felt like a symbol of our family's success. Tonight, it just felt like a wall. And for the first time in my 22 years of being a dutiful, obedient daughter, a new rebellious thought began to take root in my mind. A dangerous, terrifying, and thrilling thought. What if I just left? What if I just opened the door of the cage and flew away? The thought was so audacious, so contrary to everything I had ever been, that it made my heart pound. But as I looked out at the dark, open road beyond our garden walls, the seed of the idea didn't die. It began to sprout. The dinner party was just the opening salvo. In the weeks that followed, my life, which had once been my own, was systematically hijacked. My parents, now in a joyful, full steam-ahead planning mode, began to construct my future without any regard for my input. The engagement to David was spoken of not as a possibility, but as a settled fact. I was no longer a person. I was a project. My mother would appear in my room with fabric swatches and bridal magazines, her eyes alight with a fervor I hadn't seen in years. I was speaking with a designer, a wonderful woman from Paris, she'd announce, spreading out sketches of elaborate, traditional wedding gowns across my bed. She thinks a classic A-line with a cathedral-length veil would be perfect for your body type. Elegant, timeless. We want to convey a sense of family heritage. She never once asked what I wanted to wear. When I meekly suggested that I'd always pictured something simpler, she just patted my hand. Don't be silly, dear. This is the wedding of the year. We must look the part. My father was just as bad. He'd talk about the wedding plans over dinner, directing his conversation at the wall above my head. Samuel Wang and I have put a deposit down on the Grand Oak Country Club for next June, he declared one night. It's the only venue in the state suitable for an event of this magnitude. We'll need seating for at least 300 guests. I felt like I was suffocating. Every conversation was another bar being added to my gilded cage. I tried to protest, to make them understand. Mom, Dad, I said one evening, my voice trembling. This is all moving so fast. I don't even know if I love David. I don't even know if I like him. Don't I get a choice in this? My mother's face softened into a look of pitying concern. It was a look I was coming to hate. Oh, Lila, she sighed. Every young woman gets nervous before her wedding. It's perfectly normal. David is a good man. He's handsome, successful, from a wonderful family. What is there not to like? The love that will grow? It grows from security, from a shared life. You'll see. They weren't listening. They were hearing my protest not as a valid cry for autonomy, but as a case of pre-wedding jitters. They were gaslighting my own heart. The final, symbolic sealing of the contract happened 2 weeks later. David took me out to a stuffy, expensive restaurant. He spoke politely about his work, about the stock market, about a recent golf game. Then, over dessert, he cleared his throat and placed a small velvet box on the table between us. He didn't get down on one knee. He didn't make a speech about his love for me. He just opened the box. Inside was a diamond so large it looked fake, set in a cold, heavy platinum band. It was a magnificent, flawless, and utterly impersonal rock. My mother helped me pick it out, he said with a proud smile. She said it was a ring befitting the union of our two families. He took my hand, slid the cold, heavy ring onto my finger, and said, "So, I guess we're official now." It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact, a closing argument. I looked at the diamond glittering under the restaurant lights. It didn't feel like a symbol of love. It felt like a handcuff. That night, something inside me broke. The dutiful daughter, the girl who always tried to please, she just died. And in her place, a quiet, terrified, but determined stranger began to form a plan. Have you ever had to plan something in total secrecy? Your heart pounding with every secret click of the keyboard? It was the most terrifying and most alive I had ever felt. My part-time job at the university library, the one my parents saw as a cute little hobby, became my lifeline. For years, I had saved a small portion of my paycheck. Now, every dollar became a part of my escape fund. I opened a new, secret bank account online, one my parents knew nothing about. I started siphoning money into it, $100 at a time. My late-night study sessions for my art history finals became a different kind of research. I wasn't reading about Renaissance art. I was scrolling through maps, through articles about small, quiet towns, places where no one would know the name Chen or Wang. I needed a place where I could be anonymous, a place where I could start over. I found it, a tiny coastal town in Oregon called Port Blossom. I had never been to Oregon. I had never even seen the Pacific Ocean. It seemed like the edge of the world. It was perfect. I researched bus schedules. A plane was too fast, too expensive, and too easy to track. A bus was slow. Anonymous. It was the transportation of someone trying to disappear. I mapped out a 3-day journey across the country. The final piece of the puzzle was my family's announcement of my happy news. They had planned a massive engagement party at their house for the end of the month. It was going to be a huge affair, with all their friends and business associates. This was my deadline. I knew that once my engagement was publicly announced, the cage would be locked for good. I had to be gone before then. I packed my escape in secret. In the dead of night, I didn't pack the designer clothes my mother had bought me. I didn't pack the jewelry. I packed my oldest, most comfortable jeans. I packed my worn-out copy of Pride and Prejudice. I packed my journals, filled with all the thoughts and dreams I could never speak aloud. I packed a small, faded photograph of my grandmother, the only person in my family who I thought might understand the longing in my heart. I packed the girl I truly was into a single, worn suitcase and hid it in the back of my closet. The night before the engagement party, the house was buzzing with preparations. Florists were delivering massive arrangements. Caterers were clattering in the kitchen. My mother was happily directing it all, a general preparing for her greatest social victory. She came into my room, her face aglow. "Isn't it all so exciting? Lila, tomorrow, everyone will know, our two families, finally united." She looked at me, at my quiet face. "You should be happy. This is the first day of the rest of your wonderful life." I just smiled and nodded. She had no idea how right she was. That night, I waited until I could hear the slow, steady breathing of my father from down the hall, until the entire house was dark and silent. I took off the heavy, cold diamond ring David had given me and placed it squarely in the middle of my pillow, a silent, final rejection. With my heart pounding so hard, I was sure it would wake the entire house. I slid my packed suitcase out from my closet. I scribbled a short, simple note and left it next to the ring. "I'm sorry, I can't." Then, with nothing but $2,000 in a secret bank account, a bus ticket to a town I'd never seen, and a desperate, terrifying hope for a life that was my own, I slipped out the back door. I didn't look back. I just walked down the long driveway, out the grand gates, and into the darkness, a ghost leaving her own life behind. The bus ride across the country was a 3-day-long fever dream. I sat with my face pressed against the cool glass, watching the manicured suburbs of my old life dissolve into the sprawling, anonymous heartland of America. Each mile that passed felt like a thread being cut, severing me from the life that had been so carefully woven for me. With every state line we crossed, I felt a layer of the old Lila, the dutiful daughter in the blue silk dress, peel away. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I had never felt so alone, or so completely, utterly free. I slept in uncomfortable, upright positions, my one precious suitcase clutched to my chest. I ate stale sandwiches from gas station vending machines. I was just another anonymous face in a sea of them. A girl on a bus going somewhere, or nowhere. For the first time in my life, no one knew who my family was. No one had any expectations of me. My value was not tied to my father's business or my mother's social standing. It was zero, and from zero, I realized you could build anything. I arrived in Port Blossom, Oregon, on a misty Friday morning. The bus sighed to a halt in front of a small depot that smelled of salt and diesel. I stepped out, my legs stiff, and took my first breath of my new life. The air was cool and clean, thick with the scent of the Pacific Ocean and towering pine trees. The town was small, nestled in a cove, with a main street of weathered, 2-story wooden buildings that looked like they had been there for 100 years. It was the complete antithesis of the polished, sterile suburb I had fled. It was beautiful. My first week was a harsh lesson in reality. My $2,000, which had felt like a fortune, dwindled at an alarming rate after I paid the deposit and first month's rent on a tiny, furnished room above a fishing tackle shop. The room was shabby, the floral wallpaper was peeling, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall, but it was mine. The lock on the door was mine. The decision to be there was mine. My art history degree was, as I had suspected, completely useless. I walked up and down the main street every day, looking for help wanted signs. I was rejected from a waitress job because I had no experience. I was rejected from a job at a cannery because I couldn't lift 50 pounds. The reality of my sheltered life was hitting me hard. I had been raised to be a wife and a hostess, not a worker. Finally, I found a lifeline, a small, cozy bookstore called The Salty Page. It was a magical place, crammed floor to ceiling with old books, with a tiny cafe in the corner that served coffee and pastries. The owner was a kind, white-haired woman named Mrs. Gable, who looked at my resume, saw a university library assistant, and hired me on the spot. My life fell into a new rhythm. I'd wake up, walk the few blocks to the bookstore, and spend my days shelving books, wiping down tables, and learning how to use the giant, roaring espresso machine. I was on my feet for 8 hours a day. I came home exhausted, my muscles aching, my hands smelling of coffee grounds and old paper. I'd eat cheap ramen for dinner, sitting on the floor of my little room, and I had never, ever been happier. It's funny, right? I ran away from a life where I had everything, and I ended up here, in a tiny room, barely making rent, and I was filled with a sense of profound, quiet joy. The joy came from the small freedoms, the freedom to buy the cheap, sugary cereal I loved, instead of the organic, heart-healthy granola my mother always bought, the freedom to wear a comfortable, paint-stained sweatshirt instead of a designer dress, the freedom to be tired at the end of the day from my own hard work, not from the emotional labor of managing my family's expectations. It was at the Salty Page that I met Jamie. He wasn't a dramatic, love-at-first-sight encounter. He was just a part of the landscape of my new life. He was a regular. He'd come in every morning around 10, after his own work had started. He was a boat builder and a carpenter, and he always had a light dusting of sawdust in his dark, wavy hair and on the shoulders of his flannel shirt. He had kind, steady blue eyes and hands that were calloused and capable. He would order a large black coffee, sit at the same small table in the back, and he would sketch in a worn leather-bound notebook for an hour. Our first conversations were just simple exchanges. Another coffee. Jamie, thanks. Lila. Then, one day, he saw me reading a collection of poetry on my lunch break. Mary Oliver, he said, nodding at the book. Good choice. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I was so startled he knew the quote that I just stared at him. You read poetry. He laughed. A warm, genuine sound. Don't let the sawdust fool you. There's a lot going on under here. And after that, we started to talk, really talk. He would ask me what I was reading. I would ask him what he was drawing beautiful. Intricate sketches of boats, of seabirds, of the coastline. We talked about books and music and the strange, wild beauty of the Oregon coast. He never once asked me where I was from, or what my family did for a living, or why a girl like me was working in a small-town bookstore. He just talked to me, to the person I was. Right there in that moment, he was the first person in my life who seemed to have no agenda for me whatsoever. He just enjoyed my company. Our friendship was a slow, gentle thing, built over countless cups of coffee and shared conversations amongst the towering shelves of old books. He was funny and smart, and he had a quiet strength that I found myself admiring more and more. One afternoon, as I was closing up the shop, he was still sitting at his table, finishing a sketch. You know, he said, looking up at me, there's a potluck bonfire on the beach tonight. A bunch of my friends will be there. Nothing fancy, just food and guitars. You should come. I hesitated. A party. People. The old anxieties flared up. He must have seen the look on my face. No pressure, he said quickly, with his kind smile. Just thought you might like to get out of that little room of yours. I'll be there. It'll be a friendly crowd. I looked at him, at his open, honest face, and I realized I wasn't scared. I was excited. Okay, I said, a real smile spreading across my face. Yeah, I'd like that. That night, as I walked down to the beach, I saw the flickering light of the bonfire and heard the distant sound of laughter and a softly strummed guitar. It wasn't the Grand Oak Country Club. There were no champagne flutes or string quartets. It was just a group of ordinary people, gathered around a fire, sharing stories and food. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking towards a place where I might actually belong. I was walking towards a life that was finally, truly, my own. The bonfire on the beach was a flickering island of warmth and light against the vast, dark canvas of the Pacific Ocean. A gentle acoustic guitar was being played, its melody mingling with the crackle of the fire and the rhythmic sigh of the waves. This was nothing like the formal, stuffy parties I had grown up with. People wore hoodies and wool blankets. They drank beer from the bottle, and their laughter was loud and genuine. They were fishermen and artists and shop owners, and they were all so wonderfully, beautifully real. I felt a little shy at first, a stranger on the edge of their comfortable, tight-knit world. But then Jamie found me, handing me a paper plate loaded with grilled fish and a warm smile. Glad you came, he said, sitting on the driftwood log beside me. Me too, I said, and I meant it. We didn't stay with the main group for long. We walked away from the firelight, down to where the waves hissed against the wet sand. The moon was a silver sliver in the sky, and the stars were brighter than I had ever seen them, unpolluted by the city lights of my old life. We talked for hours. He asked me about the books I loved, the ideas that fascinated me. He listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. I told him about my love for art history, for the stories hidden in paintings, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to apologize for my passion or call it a silly hobby. He, in turn, told me about his love for the sea, for the elegant, perfect lines of a well-made boat. He spoke of wood not as a material, but as a living thing with a story and a soul. We weren't talking to impress each other. We were just sharing the parts of ourselves that mattered most. At some point, as we were walking back towards the fire, our hands brushed against each other, a little jolt. A spark of electricity shot up my arm. He stopped, and I stopped, and we just looked at each other in the dim, flickering light. He slowly reached out and tucked a stray piece of my hair behind my ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against my skin. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-style kiss. It was quiet and gentle and a little bit hesitant, as if he was asking a question, and I answered by kissing him back. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and wood smoke, and the beginning of something new and real. It was the first kiss of my life that felt like it was truly mine. That night was the beginning. Our friendship, which had been a slow, gentle bud, began to blossom into a romance, and every moment with him was a stark, vibrant contrast to the life I was supposed to be living with David. A date with David had been a formal affair at a Michelin-starred restaurant. The conversation had revolved around his portfolio, my father's business, and the strategic advantages of our union. The food was exquisite, but the evening was hollow, an empty performance. A date with Jamie was a hike through the coastal forest to a hidden waterfall he knew, a place of breathtaking, secret beauty. We ate messy, homemade sandwiches while sitting on a mossy rock, and we talked about everything and nothing. The food was simple, but the moment was full. I remember the day David had given me the engagement ring, the heavy, cold, 2-carat diamond that felt like a beautifully polished stone from a graveyard. It was a symbol of his family's wealth and my value as an acquisition. 2 months into our relationship, Jamie gave me a gift. He had carved it himself. It was a small, impossibly detailed wooden seabird, its wings outstretched as if in mid-flight. He had carved it from a piece of driftwood we had found on the beach that first night. "So you always remember you can fly," he said. Placing it in my palm, I held that little bird, and it felt heavier, more precious than any diamond in the world. Have you ever been with someone who saw a part of you that you'd kept hidden? And instead of judging it, they encouraged it to grow. That's what Jamie did for me. He didn't just fall in love with me. He helped me fall in love with myself. He was the one who noticed my constant doodling in the margins of old notebooks. He was the one who listened, really listened. When I talked about the composition of a painting or the emotional weight of a particular artist's brushstrokes, one afternoon, he came to my little room above the tackle shop with a large, flat package. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said, a smile playing on his lips. Inside was a beautiful set of watercolor paints, a block of thick, expensive paper, and a set of fine-tipped brushes. I haven't painted since I was a kid," I stammered. "I'm not any good." "I don't care if you're good," he said gently. "I just see how much you love it. I want to see what your world looks like through your own eyes. Just play." So I did, hesitantly at first, my hands feeling clumsy and unsure. But then, something broke free. I started to paint. I painted the view from my window, the gray, moody sea, the fishing boats bobbing in the harbor. I painted the towering, ancient trees of the coastal forest. I painted the interior of the salty page, with its leaning towers of books and its warm, inviting light. My small room filled up with my art. The paintings weren't perfect. They were messy and emotional, and full of my own quiet observations, and they were mine. I realized then that my true love story, the one the title of my life was all about, wasn't just about Jamie. He was a huge, beautiful, wonderful part of it, but he wasn't the whole story. The real love story was the one I was having with myself. I was falling in love with the person I was becoming, this independent, creative, brave woman who had run away from a life of suffocating certainty to embrace a future that was beautifully, thrillingly unknown. Jamie wasn't my rescuer. He was my partner, the person who held my hand while I learned to rescue myself. One evening, we were sitting in my room. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. He was sitting on the floor, sanding a piece of curved wood, and I was at my small desk, working on a watercolor of the sunset. A comfortable, companionable silence filled the space between us. I looked at him, at his strong, capable hands, at the kind, steady look in his eyes. Then I looked at the walls of my room, covered in my own imperfect, joyful, heartfelt art, and I was filled with a sense of peace so profound, a feeling of being so completely and utterly home that it took my breath away. This was it. This was the life my heart had been searching for, a life I hadn't been given, but one I had built myself, with my own 2 hands. 2 years. 2 years is a long time. It's long enough for a wound to scar over. It's long enough to build a new life on the foundations of an old one. It's long enough to forget the sound of your father's disappointed voice, and to finally, truly believe you are free. My life in Port Blossom was a quiet masterpiece of my own creation. Jamie and I had saved up enough money to rent a small, salt-weathered cottage with a porch that overlooked the ocean. He built beautiful, custom furniture in his workshop, and I had started selling my watercolors of the Oregon coast at a small co-op gallery in town. We weren't rich, we weren't important, but we were happy. A deep, soulful, quiet kind of happy that I had never known was possible. The gilded cage of my past felt like a distant, half-forgotten dream. I had lulled myself into a false sense of security. I believed that because I had left my old life behind. It had also left me. I had underestimated my father's pride. The first sign that my past was coming for me was a strange car in town, a polished black sedan that looked ridiculously out of place amongst the dented pickup trucks and rust-streaked Subarus of Port Blossom. I saw it parked near the bookstore. I saw it again later, parked across from our cottage. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, a man in a suit walked into the gallery where my paintings were displayed. He wasn't looking at the art. He was asking the owner questions. About me, the owner. A fiercely protective woman named Maggie told him to get lost. She called me immediately after. "Lila," she said, her voice tight. "There was a man in here, a city slicker in a cheap suit, asking about you. Said he was an old family friend." I got a bad feeling off him. A cold dread washed over me. I knew, with a sickening certainty, who he was. They had found me. The confrontation came the next day. I was walking home from the grocery store, my arms full of produce from the local farmer's market. The black sedan pulled up beside me. The man from the gallery got out. He was tall, with a weary professional expression. "Lila Chen," he asked. "Who's asking?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "My name is Mr. Graves. I'm a private investigator," he said, handing me a business card. "I was hired by your father, Mr. Michael Chen. He and your mother are very worried about you. They want you to come home." I just stared at him, my knuckles white on the paper grocery bag. The carefully built piece of my new life was shattering around me. He hadn't sent a letter. He hadn't tried to call. He had sent a private investigator, a man you hire to find a criminal or a runaway asset. That's what I was to him, an asset that had gone missing. "You can tell my father," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "that I'm not lost, and I'm not coming home." I turned and walked away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't look back. I had to tell Jamie everything that night, the whole ugly story, the arranged marriage, David Wang, the gilded cage, the escape. He listened patiently, his expression growing more serious with every word. When I was finished, he just reached across the table and took my hand. "Well," he said softly, "that explains why you love books about brave heroines and why you know so much about art, and also why you're so damn strong." He squeezed my hand. "This is your home now, Lila, with me. You don't have to go anywhere or do anything you don't want to do. I've got your back." His simple, unwavering support was an anchor in my storm of fear. But I knew this wasn't over. The private investigator was just the scout. The general was about to call. The call came 2 days later, an unknown number with a familiar area code. I let it ring 4 times, my heart pounding. Then I took a deep breath, looked at Jamie, who gave me a nod of encouragement, and I answered. "Hello, Lila?" It was my father's voice. And it was a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. It was not warm, it was not relieved. It was furious. It was the voice of a king whose authority had been defied. "This childish game of yours is over," he boomed. "No preamble, no, how are you? You have embarrassed this family for 2 years. You have shamed us. You have shamed the Wang family. David has been a saint, waiting for you to come to your senses. His family's patience, and mine, is at an end." I was silent, gripping the phone, my knuckles white. I have your location, he continued. You will pack your bags. You will be on a plane back here by the end of this week. We will smooth things over with the Wangs, and you will do your duty and marry their son, as was agreed upon. He was talking as if the last 2 years had never happened, as if I were still the same timid, obedient girl who lived in his house. I am not coming home, Dad, I said. And I was shocked at how steady my voice sounded. Have you ever had to stand up to a parent for the first time as a true adult? To draw that final, unbreakable line in the sand? My hand was shaking, but my voice was the calmest it had ever been. He let out a bark of incredulous laughter. What did you say? Of course you're coming home. What do you think you're doing there? Hiding out in some fishing village, living in some shack with some carpenter your little investigator friend told me about. Do you have any idea what you've thrown away? A life of luxury, for what to play? Artist in a shack. That shack is my home, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. And that carpenter is the man I love, a man who respects me. Something you and David know nothing about. Love, he spat the word like it was poison. You are a Chen. We do not throw away our futures for something as foolish and fleeting as love. You have a duty to this family. No, I said. And the word was a shield. My only duty is to myself, to my own happiness. And I have found it here. A life that I chose. A love that I chose. I am not the person you're looking for anymore. Dad, she's gone. Leela, I am warning you, he started, his voice rising to a roar. And I am telling you, I interrupted. My voice as cold and clear as the Pacific Ocean in winter, that this is my life now. You are welcome to be a part of it, but only if you can accept it. And accept Jamie. If you can respect my choices, if you can't, then we have nothing more to say to each other. I could hear him sputtering on the other end of the line, speechless with rage that his daughter, his property, was defying him so completely. I am happy, I said. A final, simple truth. I am home. Goodbye, Dad. And I ended the call. I stood there in my small, cozy living room. The sound of the ocean, a distant roar outside my window. I was shaking, the adrenaline of the confrontation coursing through me. But underneath the fear, there was a new feeling, a feeling of profound, unshakable strength. I had faced my past. I had faced my father, and I had not broken. I had chosen my own life. I had chosen my own love. I had chosen myself. Jamie came and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. You okay? He whispered. Yeah, I said, leaning back into his strength. Yeah, I really am. The gilded cage was gone. I was finally, truly, free. After I hung up the phone on my father, the silence in our little cottage was profound. I stood there, my hand still resting on the receiver, my heart still pounding from the adrenaline of a lifetime's worth of defiance finally unleashed. I had done it. I had stood my ground. I had spoken my truth. Jamie came and put his arms around me, holding me tight. I am so incredibly proud of you. He whispered into my hair. I'm terrified, I confessed. What if he just shows up? Then we'll face him together, he said simply. This is your home. You're not that scared little girl anymore. He was right, I wasn't. But the threat of my old life lingered like a phantom limb, an ache that was no longer there but that I could still feel. For weeks, every time a car I didn't recognize drove down our quiet street, my stomach would clench, but my father never came. My mother never called. There was only silence, a silence that felt, this time, like a concession. They had no power over me here, and they knew it. Slowly, the fear faded, replaced by a deep and abiding peace. My life in Port Blossom continued its gentle, happy rhythm. My paintings started selling more consistently at the gallery. Jamie's boat-building business was thriving. We adopted a scruffy stray dog from the local shelter and named him Salty. We had built a life together, a small, sturdy, beautiful life. On the 2-year anniversary of the day I first stepped off the bus in Port Blossom, Jamie and I walked down to the beach at sunset. 2 years ago, he said, taking my hands in his. A brave, scared girl got off a bus and changed my whole life. I didn't know it then, but I had been waiting for you. He got down on one knee in the wet sand, and my heart stopped. He pulled out not a velvet box with a diamond, but a small, Smooth, gray stone, polished by the ocean. I know you don't need a fancy ring, but I was hoping you'd need a husband, Lila Miller. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face as I shouted yes and pulled him to his feet. Our wedding was everything my first one was not supposed to be. It took place a month later, on the same beach where he proposed. There were no hundreds of guests, just 30 of our closest friends from town, Mrs. Gable from the bookstore, Maggie from the gallery, a handful of fishermen and artists. There were no caterers, just a massive potluck bonfire. I didn't wear a designer gown. I wore a simple, cream-colored linen dress that I could walk barefoot in. Jamie built a beautiful driftwood arch for us to stand under. And our vows we wrote ourselves. They weren't about alliances or security. They were about partnership and respect, and promising to be each other's safe harbor in any storm. As I stood there, holding his strong, calloused hands, with the sound of the Pacific Ocean as our witness and our scruffy dog, salty as our ring-bearer, I was filled with a joy so profound it was a physical presence. This love was real. This life was real. Because we had built it. A week after our wedding, I knew there was one last thing I had to do. One final act to close the book on my old life. I had one of our wedding photos, professionally printed a beautiful shot of me and Jamie, laughing, the sunset behind us. I packed it carefully in a box and included a short, handwritten note. Then I mailed it to my parents. The note was simple. Dear Mom and Dad, I wanted to share my happy news with you. 2 weeks ago, I married the kindest, most wonderful man I have ever known. His name is Jamie, and he is my home. I hope one day you can be happy for me. The life I have built is a good one. The door to it is always open, but the price of admission is respect. For me, for my choices, and for my husband. With love, Lila Miller Hess. I signed my new name with a hand that did not tremble. I sent the letter and I let it go. I had set my terms. Whether they chose to accept them was up to them. I was no longer waiting for their approval to live my life. 6 months passed, 6 months of quiet, married bliss, then, one afternoon. My phone rang. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hello, Lila. Her voice was hesitant, fragile. Lila Miller Hayes. She had used my new name. It was a small thing, but it was everything. Hi, Mom, I said, my own voice soft. We got your letter, she said, her voice cracking. It's a beautiful photo. You look truly happy. I am, Mom, I said, I really am. Your father and I, she struggled for the words. We were wrong. We didn't understand. We were afraid for you, and we handled it badly. We miss our daughter. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase years of pain, but it was a start. It was a crack in the wall I thought would stand forever. My relationship with my parents didn't magically heal overnight, but it began to. They came to visit. A few months after that, they were awkward and hesitant in my small cottage. They were confused by my simple, non-materialistic life, but they saw that I was happy. They met Jamie, and they saw the way he looked at me, with a love and respect that was undeniable. They saw that I had built a life of my own, and it was a good one. They are still learning, but they are trying, and for now, that is enough. My parents tried to write my love story for me. They had a handsome prince, a castle, and a guaranteed happy ending based on financial security. But they didn't understand that a true love story isn't about the person you end up with. It's about the person you become. I had to run away from the life they wrote for me so I could find the one I was meant to live. My true love story wasn't about running away to Jamie. It was about running away to me. He was just the beautiful, kind, and wonderful soul I was lucky enough to find on my own path. True family isn't something you are born into. Necessarily, it's a place where you are loved for who you are, not for who they want you to be. It's the place you can finally, truly, call home. Thank you for listening. If you've ever had to choose your own path over the one that was laid out for you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who needs the courage to run towards their own happy ending. I'll see you next time.